Welcome to the Capel build. It's about time that I got this plasterboarding finished. If you've been following me during the course of this build, you've been seeing that we've built this place from scratch, and when I get to the plasterboarding stage, it's something that I really enjoy doing. I've always enjoyed plasterboarding, and as a carpenter, I probably make a bit of a special job of it. Maybe it's just because we're a bit anal, I suppose, I don't know. But anyway, I'm just going to quickly run through how I go about plasterboarding, the type of tools I use, and also hopefully give you a few tips and tricks to how to set something out, how to measure up for your boards, and how to deal with waste, which is pretty important these days. If anyone's tried to get rid of plasterboard in a skip, you know it's difficult. So I'll just quickly run through the tools that we use. Obviously we use a collated type screwdriver. Now these are really swift, the depth is set, and you can fix a lot of screws in a short space of time. We also use a normal drywall sort of end on this screwdriver as well, and that's to get the edges, because sometimes when you're coming on a join or next to a wall, the thickness of the nose of this collated screwdriver is a bit of a problem. We also have an impact driver for the ones you miss, to pull them back out, and I have a drywall router here which is perfect for all of the sockets, light switches, or anything that's protruding through the plasterboard. This enables you to screw the board over them, and then you drive it in. It follows the object behind, in our case, socket boxes. It's ingenious. It's got a little tip on the end, and this little tip follows the box. You can set the depth just a little bit more than the plasterboard that you're using, and that will stop hitting the cables or anything that are going into the box. So that's ingenious. It's a real time saver. And if you're running, let's say in this example, this is a Makita, you can buy these bare, so they're not that expensive either. Obviously we have a hammer, always have a hammer, a couple of saws. This is just to do every now and then you need to do a little cut to snap into a board. Board lifter, laser level, rasps to clean up the edges when you've done your cuts, pad saw, and obviously a Stanley knife. So when I'm doing measuring up for plasterboard, the first thing I'll do is I'll do room by room. I'll use my electric tape measure and I'll just rough it in, and I'll work out how many square meters I've got. I'm using a traditional 1200 by 2400 board, which is, if you multiply that up, it's around about 2.8 square meters a board. So you multiply your room and divide it by that, and it gives you the number of boards. Then what I like to do is load out each room with the plasterboards that we need. In this room, on the ceiling, we're using a 15mm board, and it's tapered edged because we're doing tape and jointing in here. It's also foil back. Now that just adds another vapor barrier. We don't really need to use it here because we've got a vapor barrier above our OSB, beneath our insulation, but I like to use it anyway. It's a belt and braces job. The reason for using 15mm boards as opposed to 12mm boards on the ceiling is because my spacings of my joists are 600 centres. If I was using 12mm boards, I'd have to run a noggin through every single joint. So every 1200, I'd have a noggin going through. And that's quite uneconomical. It's also quite fiddly when you're using these types of joists because they invariably fall where you've got the plates, and you don't really want to be trying to fix through those plates. So it speeds things up. It's also a nice weight, this material. It's nice and stiff, unlike a 12mm board. When you're in the middle of it, it's flopping around. This doesn't tend to do it so much. You probably can't see here, but all of the boards are stacked off the floor. The screed was about 2 weeks old when I bought them in, so there's a little bit of moisture present. So it's really important that you keep the building well ventilated during the construction stage, because what you don't want to do is all that moisture going to these boards, because if you've cut plasterboard that's moist, it's awful stuff, and also it will just snap above your head. So that's another critical thing. Now, what I like to do is make sure I have as little waste as possible. Now this involves, with tape and jointing, you've got to make sure that you've got tapered edges together, and when you're butting them up, you've got a really good joint there as well. So what I tend to do is work out where I'm going to start and see how many full boards I can put in. Where I get to an end where there's an offcut, that offcut I will invariably start again with and go away again. And what that does is A, saves on waste, and B, it starts to stagger the joints throughout the ceiling. What you don't want to do is having straight joints on the board ends. You want to avoid that. So I'm just about to do this ceiling. Now this ceiling here is got raised levels and lower levels. The raised levels form what is the living room, and to the other end the dining room. And the reason we're dropping the perimeters is that we're going to hide the curtain tracks up in those areas there. So what we're going to do is actually board the high levels and board them wide, and then we'll put some timber framing round, and that will set the lower levels. And the reason I'm not boarding it right across is A, it's a waste of material, and B, it's nice to be able to put the panels up bigger and then work within them with the timber framework. So we're going to get on with that now. HiKOKI, let's put our datum line in. There we go. To me. Up and in. Now put it back in. Yeah. Happy? So the great thing about an eco joist is not only are they lightweight, they do big spans, but you get a really decent amount of fixing. Even the smallest ones are 75mm. These ones are 100mm wide, and in some cases you can get 125mm wide. So when you're joining a board, it's absolutely fantastic. When you're screwing down the middles, there's so much meat to go into that you're just not gonna miss. So if you're using a truss, let's say a traditional roof truss, the members are sometimes about 36 or 38mm, which means that to get the board dead in the middle, you're fixing 12mm from the edge of the board, and that can be fine. But if I show you here fixing close to the edge, what it does, it smashes the edge out, and actually it's not a very good fixing. So you get these lovely joists here, and you're laughing, absolutely laughing. One thing I will say about plasterboarding is spacings of screws. Now, I think the guidelines say they should be every sort of 150mm or 6 inches, which is roughly 7 or 8 screws across the board. I've been on some sites where I've seen them screwed here, here, and here, and the chances are they might hold, but at the end of the day, you know, it's best to have the right amount of screws. Indeed, in some countries, they actually use a mixed up adhesive, and they put dobs on the joists, and then they push that on. I've not seen that in the UK. If someone's doing that in the UK, then I'll be interested to hear what that adhesive is. Is it just a, you know, like a drywall adhesive, something you'd use on a wall? I quite like that idea because you do get undulations in timber. That's natural, and I'd imagine that that would take up some of those undulations. So I'd be interested to know about that product if any of you've used it or it's been specified. To you, to you, to you, and perfect. Okay. Happy days. You happy? Yeah. Good? Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Good stuff. If you notice, I haven't got any door linings in yet. So the beauty of tape and jointing is this can all be done constructionally. It doesn't really add anything at all, maybe a millimetre here and there to the face. So it enables me to keep my door linings and put all those in last. Everything's nice and clean then, hang the doors straight away. So it's not like I've got to put in a door lining and skim to it. I've got the luxury here of making my door linings, fitting them all and hanging the doors, putting the architraves on all in one go, so it's cost effective as well. It's a good use of my time. So you've just seen me put the higher of the ceilings on. So what I mean by that is these are the ones that form the panels, so above the dining area and above the sitting area. And now I'm going to reduce the perimeter round about 75 millimeters. That's 3 inches for all of our American friends. I know you're always talking about tell us in our language and all the rest of it, no problem there. So yeah, the idea of that is it just gives some definition to the spaces. So when you've got a big area like this, it's nice to sort of say, that's the sitting, this is the dining. It adds a bit of interest, and equally, where we go around the outside, I'm gonna form a recess to fix the curtain tracks, just so you don't see any of the curtains hanging. And also those curtains are gonna be going behind the pillar in the middle eventually as well. I'm going to have some joinery on that pillar, and so the curtains can tuck behind, so it's just kind of like you can hide them away. Something I've done before and it looks really quite nice. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Check back soon, because on site we have the tape and jointer starting, and I think that's well worth showing a little bit of a professional taper and jointer in action.